So, Kaya, hello. It's good to be here. This is my first time actually coming inside the stadium, and how beautiful is the view? I wouldn't blame any of you if you just stare out the window the whole time. We missed the welcome to country before. Apparently someone missed a flight, but I just want to say respect to the Whadjuk Noongar people. I love this view and I love this part of the country, and I feel like I've learnt a lot from them, especially from their elders. All right, we're here today to talk about paths beyond senior, what career growth might look like. If you've already made it to a senior engineer type role and you've been there for a while and you're wondering where else to go. I'm excited that you're all here, and my plan is to share some of my growth story, my own story, and encourage you to think of your own. Look at some of the common career paths in the tech industry, and then go through some of the questions like manager or individual contributor, big company, small company, where do you find the growth? And also look at skills, which no matter which path you choose, what are some skills that are going to help you? So quick plug, Anton mentioned it, but I've been trying to start a web devs meetup. We've had maybe a dozen or so people come each time. PerthWebDevs.com if you want to come. There's some in October and November. Should be fun. So I'm a delivery manager in the DX team at CultureAmp, DX Developer Experience. I've ended up in this kind of jack of all trades role where I do a little bit of team lead, a little bit of product manager, a little bit of engineer. I was promoted from a senior role to a lead role about 6 years ago, and I've coached and managed several other people through that transition since. So hopefully I've got something to share. I also work at CultureAmp, which cares a lot about company culture and career paths and development plans and that kind of thing. So I'm going to be leaning on some of the research from some of my colleagues as well. When I first got promoted, I asked my manager, Kevin Yank, hey, is there any good courses or books or anything? And he recommended this book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor. I later found out he hadn't read it when he recommended it to me. Classic. It's a brilliant book. I recommend it for anyone stepping into a leadership role, and it gives a realistic picture of particularly what the manager path looks like. But there's this great tool in there that she gives called the 3 conversations. And when you start managing someone and they're a new team member, you go through these kind of over 3 different times, have a chat with them. And these are the conversations. The first is life story. What decisions led you here, into this industry and into this job, and what motivated you in those decisions? And you go deep on that. And then dreams. I love the wording of this one. It's what do you want to be doing at the peak of your career? And you want to explore lots of options. I think the default is just to kind of suck up to your boss and be oh, I'd love a job as respectable as yours, sir or madam. But you explore different ones. So it's for me, it's some of them might be working in a similar company I am now, but more senior, or it might be starting my own thing. Or it might be something completely different in the industry. I'd love to be a celebrant at weddings and funerals and stuff, be with people in those life moments, completely different. But you never know what'll come up. So yeah, and then the final one is an 18-month plan. Okay, so this is what motivates you and this is where you want to grow. How do we tie that into the growth opportunities here at this company? So I want to talk about my life story a little bit because it ties into the rest of the talk. I started, this story starts when I was 11 and riding a motorbike. You know it's going to be a good story. I was on my uncle's farm, I crashed a motorbike, and I wasn't allowed to play sport for a year. And during that time, I had a kind of enterprising primary school teacher who was teaching us how to code back in the late 90s. The web was only 6 years old, and he was teaching us HTML. And I loved it, and that was my first motivating thing. Coding is fun. I got into that straight away. When I was in high school, I had my first paid job. Someone paid me, and I spent about 200 hours building their website for one of my parents' friends, and I got paid $200. I was going to be rich. But people paying me, actually realizing that. I went and I studied multimedia design or digital design at uni, and I really gravitated towards the UX stuff, so user experience, user interface, how can we make this easy to use? And then also the educational things, how can you make something that is easy to learn from? So I actually did some units in the Department of Education, and that was a surprise. That wasn't what I expected going in, but that was a motivator. Around coming out of uni, I wanted a job at a web design agency, couldn't get one. It was like almost a recession. And I ended up getting part-time jobs as like an IT guy at schools. But while I was there, it turns out I love building things for the people I work with. So I was working with teachers to build little interactive things for them to use with their students. Or I built like a student management login system back before they were common. And so I actually like just working with the people who are close to me, or like building things that solve a problem for the people I work with, that was really motivating. And I started volunteering, and like I loved that. Like I loved helping grow people, I loved leading a team, and I wanted that at work, even though I was early in my career. I think like the most intense one was like leading a team of volunteers down at Leavers Week, and we had about 100 people to coordinate, like trying to support 5,000 kids. That was wild. I got my first job at a software company, and I loved being surrounded by other engineers, like older people. So instead of just being solo and building something using like WordPress or some other CMS, it was like actually like, hey, we're doing GitHub, we've got pull requests, you've got senior engineers. I was learning about unit tests, and like I loved just soaking up from smarter people than me. But I was pulled back into that education space, and I went and I built my own. I went and a network of schools asked me to build their like attendance tracking system, like an in-house thing for them. And that was really cool. Like I was the only engineer, had to build a whole product. Like at the startup, I was just doing front end. There I had to do the back end as well. I had to think about databases. I had to think about how do you deploy it to a server. I had to think about training, like actually sitting in front of a room of teachers and teaching them stuff. Like it's wild to think about in retrospect, but like being forced to do everything like was a really good growth, but the downside was my boss wasn't an engineer either, and I just constantly felt frustrated, like he's not getting this. He doesn't understand things like technical debt or things like why it's hard to estimate work, and so that was frustrating. And I thought maybe I like starting new products, maybe I could be my own boss. I started a startup. I loved it. I convinced my friend to quit her job, and we did an education startup. She's actually now my partner all these years later. But I loved the startup world, the ambition of trying to have a positive impact on the world. We did a startup accelerator, one in Perth and then one in Sydney, and that was like, again, wild growth. You're just pushing your career a lot. But again, not surrounded by other people, so I missed that. I also found like the growth at all costs that the kind of, especially the San Francisco, Silicon Valley startup world has. I didn't like that. I found that yuck. Like I wanted to have something more meaningful. And then the final thing was like after the startup failed, I joined one last small company. And it was a small team, it was meaningful work, it was in education, I loved it, but I was getting paid a little bit below market rate, and I knew it, and I was like, hey, I just want to have a conversation maybe like over the next couple of years, like what does growth look like? And they wouldn't even have the conversation with me, like they just refused to engage, and I felt disrespected. And so I ended up leaving, and that's how I ended up at CultureAmp. So that's a bit of my story. Like, I'd be interested, usually you'd have this chat with your boss over an hour and you have some back and forth and you can kind of drill into the questions, like what motivates you? So have a think about it. Maybe over lunch you can ask someone like, you know, how did you end up here? What's some of the things that motivated you? But getting a development plan, this is the idea of like putting together a plan of like where you're at, where you want to go and how you're going to get there. I'm going to draw on some research published by CultureAmp. It's a free download. If you're in HR, they'll want to be like, hey, can we sell you something? But if you're not, they'll ignore you. You'll need to give your email address, though. Feel free to use a burner one. Don't tell them I said that. They had this stat, like why a development plan is important. Like 37% of people who leave a company leave because there's no growth opportunity for them there. It's the number one reason by a long way. So it's really important. If you're at senior and you're wondering what comes next, it's really important to have a path for yourself, and your company should care about that because they don't want to lose you because you're presumably really valuable to them. So actually getting one of these in place matters for everyone. The ideal development plan should pull together what the business needs, what your existing skills are and what you want to grow in. If you're missing any of this, like if it's just what you're already good at and it's what the business needs, then like you're doing great work for them, but you're bored out of your brain. If it's like just what the business needs and it's what you want to grow in, but you've got no overlapping skills, then you'll be having a great time, but it's not going to be very effective. And yeah, the same thing, like if it doesn't match what the business needs, then you're having a great time and they're wondering what you're doing. So you really want that win-win where there's the overlap of all these. Some companies some managers have like a really good rhythm and they make sure all of their people that in their team always have a development plan on the go. If they don't, like a lot of companies don't, like you can ask for one. I reckon most managers would be stoked if you came to them and actually asked. So like you could just say something like this. I want to keep growing my skills and having more impact. Can we have some growth and development conversations? I could share what motivates me the most and the areas I want to grow, and you could share some of what the team and the business needs most, and we could find some growth opportunities where it's a win-win. I think most managers would be stoked if you actually open the conversation and ask them that. And then when you're doing it, like the things you want to cover is like what motivates you, so those kind of opening questions I talked about, where you want to be. Like both of those are really reflective ones. Like my coworker Fraser says, like one of the most important parts of the employee development is allowing time for self-reflection. You can't figure out the path to get somewhere until you have a good idea of where you'd like to go. So you really need to put that time in for those first two parts. Like that's kind of a solo thing. But then the next three, like the skills that you're going to need for those and how you plan to get those skills and then some specific goals, they're conversations to have back and forth with your boss. And like, how do you actually go? Like, say you identify, I want these kind of skills that are going to help me for the future that I want. How do you actually identify, like, how do you actually find a path to grow? We often talk about the 3 E's, so experience, exposure, and education. So experience is like on-the-job learning, like diving in the deep end and learning how to swim. And obviously you want some support and you want some feedback and like you don't want to just fail, but getting given those growth opportunities. Like, I think this is how I learn best. Like, just let me at it and we'll see what happens and you tell me if it's going off track. Another one is exposure. So this might be like collaboration, like lots of pairing opportunities with someone who's more senior. It might be networking outside of your company and with others in the industry or with people. Yeah, it might be shadowing. Like, if you want to lead a team, but you've never seen the different ways teams can be led, it might be really cool to like go to the stand-ups and the kickoff meetings in a bunch of different teams in your company and actually just watch how they do it and get exposure and learn different ways of doing it. So experience, exposure, or education, they're the kind of things as you build a development plan that you can look into. I want to look at like the career pathways. Like I'm going to use the map and the language we use at CultureAmp, but it's quite similar at a lot of companies that are of, you know, once you've got multiple teams and like a set pathway. So some of these will be familiar. They might be the same as yours. You might have more, you might have less, you might have different words, but hopefully the ideas fit. When I joined, it was pretty simple. Like there was junior engineer, or like mid-level, and senior engineer. Some people call junior associate is another name I've heard, but mid and senior is like pretty common. And then above that, if you wanted a promotion, you became a manager. Like that was all it was. There was no other thing. So you become a team lead, or if like then you're managing multiple teams, you're a director, and then we had like a CTO. And then at some point it got big enough that like a new layer was introduced and you got a VP or vice president. I assume that there's also presidents if you're at a company that's big enough. I don't know. But like, again, there was just this like junior, mid, senior, and then it's like this management track. Whereas like a lot of people don't want that. And so at some point, we copied what others in the industry were doing, and we have separate roles for staff engineer and principal engineer. And these are the same level, so staff is the same level as team lead, same pay grade, and you're expected to have like the same amount of impact on the company, but you're doing it without leading a team. You're running solo, or you're in a team. You're not running solo, sorry, but you're mostly doing individual contributions rather than working through others, and that's the same at the principal level. So like, how do you have as much impact as someone who's managing a whole team if you're just doing it individually? Oh, I forgot. We also like added architects at some point, and then there's these like other sideways things like delivery managers, which is what my job title is now, or product managers. They're like sideways hops from engineering, which I sometimes see people jump back and forth in. But yeah, most places, there's this pathway that's like your individual contributor pathway, and then there's a management path, and then there's some sideways steps outside of that. This is a good spot to pause and just say it's okay to be content, get some hammock time. You don't need to always be climbing the ladder. Particularly like beyond senior, most roles will require more from you. Like it's not just, hey, your skills got better and now you are going to get paid more. Like beyond senior, there's usually some business need and it will require more of you. And that might not be what you want. Like for me, Anton mentioned like I've got 2 young kids and they're both neurodiverse, and so it's like it's hard work, and like I could be ambitious and like I'm at this kind of like staff level at the moment. I could try and go one higher and go for a director or a principal role, but like that is not where I'm at. Like I want my time and my energy to be going to my family at the moment, and also like to community stuff like this. Like that's what I'm more interested in. It's okay to be content, and particularly like the software industry pays reasonably well. Like even at a senior level, like you're probably getting paid quite well compared to people in other industries. So you have permission to not always climb. I wanted to say that. But you might. I want to talk about the manager IC thing for a little bit. The question of whether to go for manager, or I'm just remembering what Kate said about no acronyms, IC, individual contributor. Like that's one that I've used a lot. Choosing between those 2 paths is one of the most common questions when someone's at senior and wondering what comes next. It's an interesting choice. Just because you're a good engineer doesn't mean you'll make a good team lead. And also, well, like opposed to that, often a good engineer can make a good team lead because you know what's required and you can actually understand the requirements of the team and that kind of stuff. I feel like being a manager gets a bad rap. Like a lot of people want to avoid it and they say they just prefer to write code. There are good parts. I really enjoy it and I want to call them out. The good parts of managing. You get to build the culture you want. So like you want less meetings, you get to decide that. If you want like stand-ups to be just like asynchronous on Slack and you think that'll work for the team, you can make that call. If you want more demos with customers invited or more pairing, like what kind of team do you want? You get to set the culture. And a lot of people are worried they'll miss shipping things, but you still get to ship things, but it's actually like bigger now. Like the first time I had like a big project that was bigger than anything I could have pulled off solo, but I'd coordinated 4 or 5 people together to do the work, and then you get it done, and it feels great. You're like, we shipped a thing together, and it's bigger than I could have done on my own. You really get to invest in people, like particularly, I think most humans like being a good human, and yeah, it's really rewarding to make work good for someone. Like you spend about 1/3 of your waking hours as an adult at work, and so if you can make work good, you're making a tangible difference to that person's life, so there's something really rewarding there. And there's high collaboration, like lots of people time, and it can be quite energizing if you're the kind of person for whom collaboration is energizing. The hard parts, like hard conversations. You can't build good culture without needing to have tricky conversations. Like sometimes you need to be the person that calls out like inappropriate comments or calls out people who are not pulling their weight within the team or things like that. Like there are hard conversations to be had and you can't just sit there and go, I hope someone talks to that person. Like that's your job now. One of the other things, like you might worry about being less hands-on. So some management roles don't leave time for coding. Some do, like especially if it's a smaller team. But if you go too long just being a manager and it's the kind where you're not doing any coding, you might worry your skills are going to atrophy and you're going to have a harder time relating to engineers. There's less focus time. Like if you really crave that focus time where you just get a good like whole day stuck into a coding problem, you're going to get less of that. I think managers often end up with like back-to-back calendars, and I don't think that's good either. Like you need focus time as a manager too, but it is different, and there is less of it. So that might be really important to you. You've got to learn to trust others, particularly like if their technical tastes are different to yours. Like they might do something and it's not the way you'd build it, but it is good enough and you need to let it go. You don't want to micromanage them, but like, yeah, you've got to learn to trust their decisions. And also, like, you can get hurt. Like, you can invest your heart and soul in someone and help their growth, and then they go, you know what, thank you, I've taken a job over there now. Now that I've got these skills, I'm out of here. So that can suck. Or maybe you have to performance manage someone who's like, you know, they might be a great person, but they're really just not able to do the role really well. The first time I had to do that, least favorite thing, like, definitely lost sleep over it. So that's the kind of management path. Good parts, bad parts. The individual contributor path, like how do you have the same level of impact as a manager when you're primarily still just doing the code your way, that kind of thing. We've got some people on our staff that, like Paul and Laura, who work on like our career pathways and training for engineers and everything, and they've done like a lot of work to map out at Culture Amp the difference between a senior and a staff and a principal role. And like the competency frameworks they have are too much to fit into this talk, but I'd like a few of my favorite bits that go nicely on a slide, like the level of complexity you can have or that you can handle. Like I really liked this kind of grid view of low complexity, moderate complexity, high complexity, like in terms of technical problems that you can handle. And then whether you're doing those at a individual level, like it's just within my own card and no one else is involved, or whether it's in a team level, like it's complex and I've got to coordinate the complexity between me and my teammates, or at the team of teams, like so at Culture Amp we call them camps, but it's like, you know, we've got 5 teams all working on these complex things, and at the end the feature has to work all together. Like each of those, like at senior, you might be able to do high complexity on your own, but can you do it at a team level or at like the kind of wider camp level? And like as you move through staff or principal, I've just realized like the colors of that bottom left staff one. Anyway, the color contrast. Yeah, like as you step up, you should be able to handle the complexity that maybe you could do that in your own setting before. Now you're handling that complexity at a team level or across a whole range of teams. So they're some of the kinds of things. Dealing with unknowns, like I always like this statement, like at Culture Amp, it's like seniors, like you're autonomous when the problem is established but the solution is not. So like as an example, someone might say, hey, our back-end data models all assume there's only one language, like it's English, or maybe they're putting French in there, but it's just one language. But the customers want to supply their own translations of their content. Fix it. Like, you have a very clear problem, but you're not told, use this library, you're not told, like, structure your data models in this way, or have your user interface look like this. Like, you're kind of given a very clear problem, but the solution is up to you. Whereas a staff level, like both the problem and the solution aren't established, and you've actually got to spend time finding the problem and defining that before you move on. So maybe you get a statement like, hey, the number of bugs has gone up lately, and there's been quite a few incidents where we've had a rollback. And the team is saying they don't feel confident when they merge PRs anymore. Like, okay, what do I do with that? Like, you actually need to explore the problem space. And like we often talk about like discovering the problem as a separate piece of work and then discovering the solution once you've identified the problem and all agreed on it. So that's one way of thinking about it. Leading projects, like we talk about seniors in our company leading epics, like that involve multiple engineers in the team, whereas a staff engineer might be leading like a larger scale piece of software that spans multiple epics, like over the course of 3 months or 6 months. Like there's a bunch of epics within the team. And then at a principal level, it's like, coordinating work that requires lots of teams to be involved. One of my favorite things, this is from Gergely Orosz, who writes the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter. He talked about setting the pace. Like, assuming you are hands-on, you can make a big difference to the team's engineering culture just by doing exemplary work, where you don't cut corners and where you set the pace of development just by doing it. He gives this example of like PRs. Like, can you open small focused PRs every day rather than disappearing into a cave and 2 weeks later emerging with a PR with 6,000 lines changed? Can you give clear documentation and update documentation as you go? Are the changes easy to understand, or is it just like this chaos of a diff? Is it easy for people to review? Do you use tools like stack diffs so you can have one PR up for review while you work on the next one, so you're not blocked waiting, but you're kind of progressing? Do you include testing plans or like accessibility things or rollback plans? Like, do you include that information in your PRs? Before and after screenshots or videos of the workflow of it working. Like, there are all these things you can do that a lot of the time people just don't bother, but it makes a huge difference to the team culture. And if you're the role model in the team, and often as like a staff engineer, you are a role model, like you can just, even in simple work, you can do it in a really healthy, really sustainable way where everyone sees it and they go, oh, that's what good looks like. And you're setting that example, and that lifts the whole team. And so it's not just the code you're shipping, but by the example you set, everyone else in the team is learning from you. So that's a bit about like the individual pathway. Like, how do you choose? Do I want to be an engineer? Do I want to be a manager? I love this post by Charity Majors. She's the CTO at a company called Honeycomb that does like observability stuff. But she talks about the engineer-manager pendulum. And she says, the best frontline engineering managers in the world are the ones that are never more than 2 or 3 years removed from hands-on work, full-time down in the trenches. And the best individual contributors are the ones who have done some time in management. And the best technical leaders in the world are the ones who do both, back and forth, like a pendulum. And so you actually do a little bit of management for a stint, and you do a little bit of individual contribution for a stint, and you can kind of switch between them. The higher up your career path you go, and she says this in her blog post, the more likely you are to kind of get stuck. Like if you get to a director role, it becomes harder. You're so long gone since you were writing code that it's going to be hard to switch into the equivalent individual role. And same, like there's no equivalent at vice president or like, these kind of executive roles. Like at some point you can get trapped in these, now I'm just a manager, whereas like the first step after senior, where it's team lead or like kind of a staff level engineer, it's possible to jump back and forth. And for the record, this is what I see myself doing. The next thing I wanted to talk about, like, where do you find the best growth opportunities for you? Like, is it a big company? Is it a small company? Is it going solo? Like, when I shared my story at the start, there was kind of 4 periods where I had the most rapid growth in my career. One of them was that first SaaS business, AgWorld, where I was surrounded by like, 20 other engineers and a company of about 40 people overall. And like, that's not a huge company, but it was bigger. Like, you're part of a team, there is structure, there are more senior people around, and it's growing quickly. And then similarly, when I first joined CultureAmp, like it was 150 people, and now it's 900. Like, so over 7-8 years, there's just been this massive growth, and I've been able to grow with it and been able to learn how to be a manager. So they're like some of the big company things. And then the other 2 periods was when I worked on that in-house school information system, and I had to do everything solo, and then when I did the startup. And there's growth opportunities at both. So at a big company, sorry, just a sec. At a big company, the growth opportunities look like having smart people to learn from, scaling challenges, like it might actually be, hey, we need this to work for 100 million users, or like for massive amounts of data. You might get the chance for internal career hops, like you don't have to give up your leave balance, or you don't have to like go through the challenge of learning everything new. You can switch teams or switch roles. There's a bit more space for that. And often there's a learning and development budget, and you might be able to use it on coaching or on courses or on going to conferences. Shout out to DDD Perth for having a conference you can actually afford by yourself, as opposed to costing $800 for a day. But you usually get some of those at a bigger company. Whereas at a small company, the things that you'll grow from are really different. Like just having to wear lots of different hats. Like I said, I was doing front end and back end and deployments, so like the ops side of it. And I had to also present, do training, and I had to do the support. And like, you just have to do everything. And in some ways, that's really amazing experience, which pays off later. Also, when you get stuck, you can't just like say in stand-up the next day, oh, I got stuck, like, can someone else take this one over, or can someone else pair with me and help me through it? Like, you have to push through the hard problems yourself. And that is actually, like, it's so good for like building your own sense of resilience and your sense of how to solve hard problems. Like, there's something really good about being on your own like that. And you're also less likely to coast. Like in a small company, if someone's not pulling their weight, you know, like, and everyone in your team knows, and you know, you have like a really strong sense of like, oh, like, this is the standard I have to be at. Yeah, so that pressure is good. Whatever it is, like big company or small company, what I'd encourage you to think about is like this burst mode idea. There was an interview with Steve McConnell that I listened to just last week. He said, you don't want it all the time, but if you had to go through your whole career and never experience that, like one of these burst modes, like high growth, I'd feel like I missed out on something. So you don't want to be in burst mode for your whole career. You'll burn out, you'll be exhausted. But if you are in a life stage where you're like, I want to grow and I've got capacity to grow, put yourself in an environment where there is going to be high growth, either because it's small and you have to do everything, or it's big and it's growing and you can grow with it. Also, I love that it's like this guy with inflatable stuff and burst. Anyway, so I've got about 10 minutes left. I just want to give skills to grow in that are relevant either way. The first of them, sharp feedback. Like, no matter if you're looking at management or individual contributor, it's crucial that you're always growing and coaching and investing in the people in your team. And feedback is one of the most reliable ways to do that. So I did some training from a group called Life Labs, and they had this thing called the playing cards method, which I really loved. It's like on the ones at the top are blurry, and the ones at the bottom are specific, and the ones on the left are critique, and the ones on the right are praise. And so it's okay to have, like, you know, I don't want to just call it positive and negative feedback, because negative feedback is actually like critique. It can be good. So I like this phrasing, but they really talk about like blurry and specific as the difference between what's good and bad, rather than just is it positive or negative? Is it a critique or praise? So like you can imagine like club as like someone just clubbing you in the head, and maybe they say something like, you were rude in that retro. And you're like, okay, what did I do? Whereas like specific is like a spade, think gardening and helping them grow. I noticed you rolled your eyes when Chris shared their feedback. like if you can actually pinpoint the actual thing, it might help them understand what's happening. And on the praise side, like blurry praise, like kind of sweet lolly heart candy, it's like sweet but lacking substance. Maybe just great job on that PR. Like, it feels nice, but it doesn't help you know what to do better. Whereas like a diamond is sharp praise, like a real gem. I liked the way in that PR that you called out the risks and what mitigations you'd already done and the rollback strategy. I felt way more confident when I reviewed it. So for both critique and praise, like sharp is better than blurry when it comes to feedback. One of the ways to make things sharp is this model that we talk about all the time at CultureAmp: situation, behavior, impact. So like a bad example, hey, you jumped in on a ticket when Louis was on support. Don't do that. A better example, like the situation, Louis was on support rotation and a ticket outside his usual area came through. Behavior, you jumped in and did that support request because you're more familiar and you thought you could do it faster. But the impact, I know you're trying to help, but it took your focus away from this project I really needed you on. And it also meant Louis didn't get the chance to learn more about that area of the code base. I would have liked it if the support ticket was answered slower, but we got your focus over there and Louis came away knowing a bit more. You've laid out the situation and what they did, and then you've actually explained the impact. So there's, yeah, I've got links to all this stuff that I'll share afterwards. Next skill, strategic thinking. Like for both individual contributors and managers, you should be thinking about like the company, not just your team, not just the project that's happening. Like what is really important for you to be focusing on right now? But like, what does thinking strategically even mean? I love this book by Richard Ramelt, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And there's also a blog post by Dave Kellogg that if you don't read a whole book, you can just summarize, read the summary in the blog post. But they say the kernel of a good strategy: diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent actions. So diagnosis is like naming the big problem that you're facing at the moment, and then have a guiding policy that addresses that, and then the coherent actions are like the things that you do to actually carry out the policy. So example of a bad strategy, like I've seen plenty like this. Our strategy: deliver the top 5 requested features, reduce bug count by some number, increase test coverage for more stability, and switch to new frameworks as we go. Like, these could all be good things, and it might be what you need to do, but it doesn't help people prioritize and actually choose what they're doing. Whereas like a better strategy actually like names out the biggest problem. So this is an example that is like one from Culture Amp that's real. And a bit controversial because it involves rewriting a whole product from the ground up. So the diagnosis: our Perform product has good ideas, but it's got too many bugs and it isn't keeping up with competitors, so it's not doing well. We try to catch up, but the code is a mess, so even simple things take forever. And they'd had attempts at fixing it, but like it was stuck. And so that's the diagnosis. You've named the problem. The guiding policy: we're going to rebuild it in a modern stack and fix the things as we go, do it the way it should have been done. It's going to match the existing features one for one. It's not going to be scope creep and the perfect product we imagine. It's going to be like a quick rebuild, just a few months, do the thing, match it exactly. And once it's done, then we'll add new stuff. And so then they had actions, like one team's going to do it first, prove that it works. And if that works, we're going to code freeze the whole thing, and every team is going to do the rebuild. We've got board level approval. And while that's happening, the PMs are going to focus on like, what is the playbook for like, once this is done, like how are we going to ship stuff super fast and catch up? And they did it. They took more than a few months, like it did go a little bit longer, but they actually pulled it off. Domain expertise is another skill. So like when I was spending all that time in ed tech, like education technology, like I learned lots about how classrooms work, what problems teachers are facing, what kinds of opportunities they were excited about. And if you can do all that, like the more you can go into the domain that your company is in, the more valuable you'll be. And then the final one, product thinking. I feel like this one is getting more relevant. Like a lot of product managers and designers are beginning to like vibe code into the engineering space. And meanwhile, I think engineers who can use product skills are going to become more valuable. And particularly once you're kind of the most senior engineer in a team, you really need to be interacting with the product managers and the designers in your team. Final book recommendation. I love this book by Teresa Torres, Continuous Discovery Habits. It talks about like having a leadership trio. So usually that's like a graphic designer and a product manager and an engineer of some kind. And together you actually do all of the product discovery together and pick your roadmap. But you don't just leave it to the person who has the product manager title. You're heavily involved. So definitely an amazing skill to have that will help as you move beyond senior. And with that, I'm done. Right, takeaways like build your own development plan, think about what motivates you, think about the engineer, manager, pendulum, and like where you can go to get that burst mode. And then, yeah, think about what skills you can build now and how to get them. So that QR code links to like all the links and book names and everything I've put on a post on my blog. So feel free to go grab that or just jasononeil.au. Yeah, and thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Jason. It's good to have concrete things to take away from that. So we have a bit of time for questions. Are there any in the crowd? Raise your hand if you have. Oh, yep. All right. On my way. Oh, parkour.
Do you have any advice for how do we figure out what we want to do?
Out of the options that I was just like career path things? Yeah.
How do we figure out what we want to upskill in?
Yeah. I think having a picture of like some of the things you'd love to do at the peak of your career, I think that was key for me. Like going, I don't know that I want to be a VP of engineering and have like they get a high salary, but like they're not actually writing code anymore. It looks really stressful. Like it interrupts your life balance. Like I think having a picture of the things you actually want helps. And then it's about like knowing what the skills are. And maybe your boss is the right person for that conversation, but maybe it's someone else. Like try and find someone in the industry who has a job that is like, oh, that's kind of like what I want. What skills are important? And like just understanding, oh, like you need to have really good architecture skills to. I'm already good at that. That's fine. Or you need good skills for something else. Oh, that's a growth area. Like just finding the people who have been in similar roles, and then going what skills are there, and then from there, pick the ones you need to grow in. Does that answer it?
I think so. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yep, I'll head over.
Hi. I hope we didn't crash your website behind that QR code because it says error establishing a database connection. But I do have a question, genuine question.
Oh, that's sad. Sorry.
That's all right.
I'll check that after.
Yeah. So I myself, I used to be a senior role as well, and I have a friend or a former office mate who also used to be a CTO role and just downgraded straight to a developer role.
Yeah.
Just slightly above associate role, but not even senior. If you're looking for jobs elsewhere and you're on that kind of predicament, how do you navigate that conversation with recruiters saying that, oh yeah, I used to be a CTO, but then I turned into a associate? Or say, for example, like me, I used to be a senior, and then I went back to like playing junior role, but thankfully I'm back up again to where I really
Was
want
it
to
a more junior role because it was like a sideways step, like into a different speciality or something? Like
No, exactly that ladder that you were showing earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the topmost is the CTO and the lowest would be like a
Was it
junior
at
developer.
from a small place, CTO of a small pond to small fish in a big pond? Or
Let's
no?
just say medium enterprise companies.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'd be really clear about like what you're good at and why you're motivated to join. Like, is it a company that you really care about and you just want your foot in the door because you're like, you've got a great product and I want to be part of it? Or like, is it in some specialty where you want to grow and you want that experience? Like, I'd be really clear about like what your motivation is. I think people would be confused if you're taking what looks like a big downward step. But if it makes sense to you, I'd just spend the time to explain that and let them know what your motivation is. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, we'll probably have time for one more.
Yeah, I've got a question about this kind of engineer-manager pendulum you talked about.
Yeah.
So like I'm a staff engineer now and have previously been a team lead, so I've kind of experienced some of that myself.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of wondering if you sort of have any tips for how you might, give feedback to a colleague where you sort of think that, you want to give a specific critique to what they're doing, but at the same time, the manager in the team is also not resolving the issue in the way that you might have done it yourself as a manager.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to, I guess, like try to influence both the individual contributors in the team and the manager of the team. Any tips
Fun
for that one?
I'd focus like the feedback on the things that you've seen and can directly talk to. Like if you witnessed something or you reviewed some code or like it was in a meeting and you saw something, like if you were part of it and you saw the impact yourself, then you can talk directly to it. Whereas I feel like a manager sometimes has to be triangulating, like they have to address stuff even if they didn't see it. Whereas I think if you're in the team and you saw it, you should feel permission to speak up about it if there's good psychological safety. And if there's not, then that's feedback for the manager of the team. I think a balance of like knowing, and particularly if you can have a good relationship with the manager and be like, hey, like, I want to respect your leadership, but I also I've been in this role, like, are you happy for me to kind of give the feedback as I go? A mix of like praise and criticism, like what's going well. Like if you can have that healthy relationship and they know that, then I think you will feel more permission to like just speak up and share more often. But it does require a level of connection, and you got to do that work first. So for the manager, I'd get that relationship in place, and then for the other people in the team, even if you're not their boss, if you saw it and you saw the impact, I feel like you should be allowed to comment. Yeah. All right.
All right, thanks very much again to Jason for a great talk.